Welcome to Turtle Time Tale, where sleepy stories light up the night sky. If you enjoy gentle bedtime adventures, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you never miss a tale. Now, snuggle in and let the story begin. Tonight's story is called Crispin and the Coral Castles. Crispin and the Coral Castles. Beneath the waves of the quiet reef, where moonlight sparkled gently through the surface and seaweed swayed like lullabies, lived a little crab named Crispin. Crispin wasn't like the other crabs. He didn't scurry sideways in a hurry, he didn't pinch or poke, and he didn't like noisy shell-chasing games. Instead, Crispin built. He loved to collect bits of coral, smooth stones, shiny shells, and driftwood branches. While others played tag with the current or raced to the jelly beds, Crispin could be found stacking tiny pebbles, balancing sea glass, or tucking sea flowers just right into a coral nook. He was a builder, a dreamer, a quiet artist beneath the sea. But Crispin didn't want anyone to know. Each morning, just before the reef began to stir, Crispin would tiptoe from his tiny sandy den and shuffle quietly to a hidden clearing behind the kelp wall. It was there, beneath a blanket of dancing seagrass, that he built his coral castles. Some were tall and twisty, like seahorse towers. Others were round and gentle, like turtle domes. One even had a starfish roof and a seashell swing. And no one saw them. Because every day when Crispin finished building, he'd quietly bury his castles in the sand. Why? Because he was afraid they weren't good enough. What if someone laughed at his crooked coral arches? What if they thought it was silly for a crab to build instead of play? So he kept his castles hidden, and he kept his heart quiet. Still, he smiled as he worked, because building made him feel like the ocean itself was humming along. One morning, as he placed the final pearl stone on the tiny shell bridge, Crispin looked up and saw a shimmer in the water. Not a fish, not a jelly. It was the sun, rising gently through the waves. He blinked his tiny eyes and whispered to no one at all. Maybe just one more tower. So he added one, and another, and then a tiny bubble garden. Each bubble was carefully placed in a circle of shell rings. They danced upward when touched, like a giggle rising through the sea. Crispin giggled too. Just a little, but then he heard voices. Milo, Coral. Oh no, they were nearby. He looked at his coral castle, halfway finished and glowing softly in the morning light. Too late to hide it now, he mumbled nervously. But the voices drifted away. They hadn't seen him. Not yet. Crispin sighed with relief and a tiny bit of disappointment. It would be nice, he thought, just once, to show someone. But instead, he gently covered the castle with a layer of soft sand, tucked away the shiny stone he used for polishing, and scuttled quietly back to his den before anyone could notice. That night, as the moon rose and Luna's glow shimmered across the reef, Crispin peeked from his little sandy doorway and watched the waves. The ocean was calm, but deep inside, Crispin's little heart was stirring. Maybe tomorrow, just maybe, he wouldn't hide the next one. The next morning, the reef slowly stretched awake. Sunlight tiptoed through the kelp. Fish fluttered out of their sleeping shells, and sea anemones yawned into motion. But Crispin was already gone. He had woken earlier than usual, and his little claws had tingled with a new idea. He scurried through the sleepy reef, carrying a piece of sea glass in one claw and a polished shell in the other. "This one," he whispered to himself, "will be my best yet." He reached his secret kelp clearing and paused. The sand was smooth, undisturbed, a blank canvas. Crispin beamed. With careful claws, he started to build. First, a spiral base made from sand dollars, then walls of stacked coral, balanced like puzzle pieces. Tiny shells formed arches, and a starfish sat gently on the tallest spire like a crown. He added a sea glass window, letting the morning sun beam through in dancing colours. It glowed, really glowed. Crispin stepped back and gasped. This was it, his finest castle yet. And then he didn't bury it. Not this time. He sat beside it, claws tucked under him, just watching. The reef hummed softly around him, as if even the sea approved. Then, footsteps, or rather, fin steps. Crispin's eyes widened. He quickly scurried behind a rock. Peeking out, he saw two familiar shapes, Milo and Coral. They were laughing, following a stream of glowing bubbles, completely unaware of the castle ahead. Crispin's heart raced. What if they saw it? What if they laughed? He crouched lower behind the coral, holding his breath. Then Milo's voice floated through the water. "Whoa, what's that?" Crispin's claws twitched. Coral swam ahead, stopping right in front of the castle. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Milo swam in a slow circle around it. "Do you think someone made it?" Crispin felt his shell heat up with a mix of panic and pride. They weren't laughing. They were amazed. Coral touched the sea glass window gently. "It feels like it was made with love." Milo nodded. "I hope we meet whoever made it." Then, just as quickly, they drifted away, still chatting, following the trail of light. Crispin stayed frozen behind the rock. His heart was thumping so loudly he thought the sea could hear it. Then slowly, he stepped out. He looked at his castle. It had been seen, appreciated, loved. He didn't know what to do with the feeling bubbling inside him. But one thing was clear. Tomorrow he would build again. And maybe, just maybe, he'd leave that one too. The next day, Crispin woke up feeling different. He lay quietly in his cozy burrow, watching tiny rays of sunlight twinkle through the waving seagrass. His claws itched, not from worry, but from excitement. For the first time, he didn't feel like hiding. "I'll build something new," he whispered to himself. "And I won't cover it up." With a puff of sand, he scurried out and returned to his clearing. The space felt brighter today, like even the reef was cheering him on. Crispin pulled out some treasures he had collected. A smooth driftwood stick, 2 shiny shells, and the string of seaweed he'd braided the night before. He wasn't sure what he was going to build yet, but somehow his claws knew what to do. Piece by piece he worked. The driftwood became a bridge, arched and delicate. He placed tiny shell steps beneath it and tied the seaweed like a little green banner across the top. When he stepped back, it looked like something out of a dream. Just then, a swirl of bubbles floated past him. "Crispin?" He turned, and there was Coral, bobbing gently with a curious smile. "I was hoping I'd find you here," she said. "Milo told me about the castle." Crispin blushed. "You saw it?" Coral nodded. "It was amazing. But this," she looked at the bridge, "this is even more special." Crispin's eyes widened. "You really think so?" Coral twirled one of her tentacles and smiled. "I know so." Crispin didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the bridge, then at Coral, then back again. And then he smiled. A full, proud, nothing-to-hide smile. "Want to help me build another one?" he asked. Coral squealed with joy. "Yes." And just like that, the two new friends began gathering coral, shells, and sea glass together. The reef glowed a little brighter that day, and so did Crispin. Crispin blinked up through the gentle current. The path ahead shimmered, bathed in pale green light. "This is it," Coral whispered. "The place I told you about." They drifted forward, slowly, carefully, until the reef opened into a clearing unlike anything Crispin had ever seen. It glowed. Tiny fish the size of bubbles floated in lazy loops, their scales glistening with soft golds and purples. They moved as if they were dancing, forming gentle spirals in the water. The entire space was alive with color, motion, and light. "Welcome to the Garden of Glowfish," Coral said. Crispin's little claws curled against the sand. "It's beautiful!" The coral here wasn't jagged or sharp. It flowed like velvet underwater hills, dotted with tiny star-shaped flowers that pulsed with light. Soft sea grasses swayed gently, brushing past them like lullabies. One of the glowfish swam close to Crispin and paused, hovering just in front of him. It blinked once, twice, then spun in a circle before zipping off into the glowing crowd. "They're not afraid," Crispin whispered. "No," Coral said with a smile. "They know who belongs here." The two friends sat together, nestled into a bend in the coral. The glowfish glided overhead like slow-moving stars. Crispin closed his eyes for a moment and listened. The water hummed with the quiet beat of the reef, soft and slow and steady. "Do they always stay here?" he asked. Coral shook her head. "Only when it's safe." That made Crispin think. After a moment he said, "Then maybe this is how we'll know the reef is okay again, when the glowfish stay." They sat in silence for a while, bathed in the soft light. A breeze of bubbles tickled the water, and far above, the surface shimmered like a dream. Coral reached out with one gentle tentacle and placed it over Crispin's claw. "We're doing good, aren't we?" Crispin smiled. "I think so." From the shadows, unseen eyes watched them. Not threatening, but quiet, curious, kind. And as the glowfish circled once more, their trails left gentle patterns in the water, like lullabies written in light. Dark clouds rolled above the ocean surface. Though the reef lay deep below, the waves above churned and pulled, casting flickers of shadows through the water. The once gentle current now tugged at the coral and sand with growing strength. Crispin peeked out from his burrow. His little claws gripped the edge as bubbles rushed past. Coral swam by, her tentacles swaying hard against the current. "The storm's getting stronger," she called, her voice muffled by the swirl of water. Crispin nodded. "Should we stay in?" Before Coral could answer, a sudden blast of current knocked her sideways. "Coral!" Crispin darted forward, catching her just in time and pulling her behind a rock outcrop. They both huddled there, the water pushing and swirling all around. For a moment, Neither of them spoke. They just breathed, bubbles rising between them. Then Coral whispered, "We need to help the reef." Crispin looked confused. "Help?" Coral nodded. "The baby glowfish, they nest in the shallows. If the current sweeps in, their eggs could get pulled out." Crispin blinked. "But it's dangerous." Coral's eyes were wide, scared but steady. "We can be careful, but we can't do nothing." Crispin stared at her, then took a deep breath. "Okay, let's go." Together, they pushed through the current, dodging tumbling shells and shifting seaweed. The water whipped around them, but they stayed close. They reached the shallows, a soft patch of sand with glowing bubbles nestled between coral arms. The glowfish eggs. Some had already come loose, drifting. Coral rushed to catch them with her tentacles, gently guiding them back to their nest. Crispin used his claws to dig small walls of sand around the patch, creating a barrier. More eggs floated in from nearby, tiny glowing orbs dancing in the chaos. They worked fast, careful and calm. Finally, the current began to slow. The reef settled. Coral sat beside Crispin, both of them exhausted but smiling. "You were brave," Coral whispered. Crispin looked at the glowing nest. "We were brave." And from the shadows of the reef, those watching eyes blinked once again, warm and proud. The reef was safe. For now. The reef was quiet again. But now, it was the good kind of quiet. Crispin and Coral swam slowly through the soft waters near the coral towers. Everything felt calm, peaceful. The storm had passed. "I wonder who left that shell," Crispin said, thinking back to the spiral shell the silent watcher had left behind. Coral nodded. "Maybe we'll find another." As they turned into a familiar part of the reef, Coral paused. "Do you hear that?" Crispin stopped. A gentle hum floated through the water, soft and musical, like someone whispering a lullaby into the sea. They followed the sound, winding between coral branches and sea fans. The humming grew clearer, low and warm, then rising, like a song that came from the reef itself. Then they saw it. A patch of sand nestled between old stone corals, shimmered with tiny shells, each one glowing slightly. Crispin stepped closer. "What are they?" Coral tilted her head. "They're song shells. I've heard stories, but I didn't think they were real." She picked one up gently. It hummed. Not loud, but soft and deep, like a sleepy heartbeat made of music. Crispin picked one up too. The moment he held it, it vibrated gently, humming a different note than Coral's. "They're singing," he whispered. The two friends sat there listening. Each shell had a voice, some low, some high, some fast, some slow. But together, they didn't clash. They blended, like an underwater choir. Then, Coral smiled. "Maybe they're voices from the reef." Crispin nodded slowly. "Or memories." They sat quietly, placing the shells in a spiral on the sand, arranging them by sound. As the spiral grew, the hum turned into a gentle melody, calm and slow, like waves rocking a cradle. Without speaking, they both lay down beside the shell spiral. The song washed over them like a lullaby. For the first time since the storm, everything felt still and safe. Far above them, the waves danced in the sun, but deep in the reef, a song curled through the coral. A song made of stories. A song just for them. The next morning, the reef felt different. Not because of a storm or shadow, but something softer. The kind of feeling you get when something wonderful is about to begin. Crispin woke early, his little claws twitching with excitement. He had a feeling today was special. Coral met him near the Driftwood Bridge, her eyes wide and bright. "I had a dream," she said. "The shells were singing, but they weren't just sounds. They were directions." "Directions?" Crispin asked. Coral nodded. "To a melody, one we've never heard before." Curious, they returned to the spiral of song shells. The shells still hummed gently, their tones low and soothing. As they leaned close, Coral pointed. "Listen, the order of the notes, it's changing." Sure enough, the shell melody was shifting. Rising, falling, leading somewhere. Without a word, they followed it. The hum of the shells guided them deeper than they'd ever gone. Through tunnels of glowing sea moss, past ancient coral cliffs. The reef grew quiet again, not out of fear but reverence. Then they reached it, a cavern of light. The water shimmered in gold and pale blue, glowing from crystals along the cave walls. In the center floated a large glowing clam, closed tight but pulsing with light. The melody came from within. Crispin and Coral hovered before it, silent. Then Coral whispered, "It's the melody of peace." The clam began to open. Inside wasn't treasure or pearls, but a light, soft and pulsing like a heartbeat. The melody flowed from it, not from one shell, but all of them, all together. A song woven from everything the reef had been holding. The storms, the joy, the watchers, the friendship, and the hope. The song didn't need words, it just was. Crispin and Coral held each other's claws and tentacles, smiling as the melody wrapped around them. It wasn't loud, but it was strong, like the reef itself, alive and healing. They stayed there until the light began to dim. The melody softened into a hum, and even as it faded, it stayed in their hearts, forever. Later that day, the reef seemed to sparkle a little more. The seaweed danced with a rhythm, the coral swayed like it was humming, and the glowfish spun in slow circles, like a celebration. Crispin and Coral returned to the coral clearing, their favorite spot. "We've been to so many places," Coral said, settling beside him. Crispin nodded, and met things we never thought were real. They looked at the items they had gathered, a piece of driftwood from the bridge, the polished spiral shell, a tiny song shell, and a single glowfish scale. Memories of everything, but they didn't need to speak them out loud, because they could feel them. The reef felt different now, safer, stronger, as if the storm had been part of the music all along. Then, a soft hum echoed nearby. Crispin turned to see Milo, the baby turtle, swimming gently toward them. Behind him was Luna, the gentle sea moth they had first glimpsed during the storm. She glowed softly, wings fluttering in slow rhythm. "You found it," Milo said, smiling. Coral blinked. "Found what?" Milo floated beside them. "The melody, the reef story." Crispin smiled. "It was always here, we just had to listen." They all sat together as the reef swayed softly around them. The sea hummed, the shells glowed, and the reef breathed in time with them. As the sun began to set above the waves, the colours deepened in the clearing. Purple, blue, and gold rippled through the water like a final note in a lullaby. Crispin took a deep breath. We're home. And from the edges of the reef, in the quiet folds of coral, the silent watcher blinked one last time, then faded peacefully into the sea. The story wasn't over, but for now, it was time to rest. The end.